Hey, everybody. Brad Spencer here. And we're going to be firing up a great Facebook Live here today. We're going to be talking, Dean will be joining me in just a second, about the difference between avoiding the story and investigating the story. And we talked about this the other day.
When we were talking about separating the facts from the story. Hey, what's up, dude? There's the man with
Hey,
the plan.
how's it going, man?
It's going good. I got me a fresh haircut over the weekend for all our videos, you know. Gotta
Nice,
look
good,
fresh
good.
and fresh and fly.
Sweet, sweet. That's
Yeah,
always good.
yeah,
I need one
yeah,
of those.
man.
Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, dude, I'm super excited. Yeah, so I think I already heard you introduce this, but we are here talking about avoiding the story and investigating the story. So this is the second part in the Unstuck, how to get unstuck, how to even know when you're stuck series. So I'm excited to hear about this and just get your perspective on it. So kind of, can you recap what we talked about last week, which was just how to get unstuck, like, or even to know when you're unstuck, and
yeah.
then we'll run into this.
Yeah. So just briefly, like we talked the other day about knowing when you're unstuck, and knowing when you're unstuck basically comes down to like what feelings you have. Like if you're unsure about something or if you're hesitant, that's stuck, right? Any of those related feelings, and it could be with anything, and it's not a bad thing. It's just data, like, and that's the big key, is that when you feel that way, it's not a bad thing. It's actually just a signal that you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
And usually that comes from not knowing when to take the first step on something. So you're either unclear on what you want or where you're at, or what the first step is, which that's 90% of the time. And then we kind of walked into the idea of separating the facts from the story, right? Which is huge. Most people think their stories are the facts of the situation, and objectively, we as humans, this is where procrastination and all that other stuff comes in, because at the end of the day, it's easier to avoid than to actually dive in and look at the crap. And I've actually got a great example of this this
Oh,
weekend, actually. Yeah, that's why I was like so excited when you sent me the topic. And just for everyone watching, for the fun part, Dean's actually keeping me in the dark on the subject of these videos until we actually shoot them, which is really fun. So I don't know if you're ever stuck on creativity. Quick thing: don't come up with the topic until like 5 minutes before you're going to shoot it. It's way more fun this way. So just so you guys know, we're not here trying to be all fancy Hollywood. We're here just to get the meat and potatoes and get you guys moving ahead. So yeah, so that's the recap, Dean. So where do you want to start out? Like
yeah,
I'll
no,
let
it's
you
great.
lead this one.
Yeah, no, it's great. So one of the issues that I had when you and I were first working together a couple years ago was that the fact that I actually didn't know. So even when I realized, oh yes, we do tell ourselves stories. One of the biggest reasons we get stuck is we have this frame of mind, this mindset, and these stories that we tell ourselves. It might be something like, oh well, I'm a full time, I can't be a full time entrepreneur because I have no skills, or I can't be, I'm going to be stuck at my job that I don't like because I have to put food on the table.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
I can't talk with people. I mean, even with me on these Facebook lives, I used to tell myself that people are going to think that I'm just some poser or whatever, um, and I had to actually tell change the story into, no, I have a lot of valuable information to give,
Totally.
being a full-time entrepreneur and everything like that, that could help a lot of people, and since I've been through this. So one of the problems I had was avoiding my stories. Even though
Mm.
even when I knew I was telling myself something, because you taught me how to even tell when I was stuck, or even tell when I had a story, and then I would avoid even looking into it. And I would say, well, okay, now I know the story. All I have to do is not think about that, or like, basically I have to say, oh yeah, that story's not true, and then move on, and everything will be magically fixed.
Yep.
So once you know that you're telling yourself a story, what do you think is kind of like the next step to not avoid, or like, why do you want to, I should say, why do you want to investigate it rather than avoid it?
Awesome. Okay, so first off, I'm going to say a couple things. That's freaking amazing. One, avoiding stories is not bad. The reason people avoid their stories is because they think avoiding is bad. Avoiding is actually a defense mechanism, right? So as human beings who want to stay in the collective, if you will, that's the mechanism that we stay in the collective with. Like, we fit in, like, in past times, that was a good thing. To fit into society meant you were part of the community, which meant you were fine, okay? Now, the world doesn't really work that way anymore, but we still have a lot of that programming. And even in school, people are like, oh, fit in, go get a job, like get a good secure job with benefits. Like, that's one of the common stories that we were all sold on. So for anyone watching this, that's the first thing. Don't beat yourself up for avoiding, but we're going to fix that, because it's actually easier to investigate your stories than it is to avoid them, because avoiding them is like negative compound interest. It compounds like interest, but in reverse. So just like how, you pay a lot of interest on credit cards versus an investment, your energy is being compounded in reverse when you avoid. But first off, you have to admit that, hey, you're trying to protect yourself. It's okay. No big deal. Today is a new day. So first off, there's that. Next, to avoid a story is, and this is where like a lot of really smart people have a lot of problems. Like, you're very academic. I do this all the time. Like full play. I mean, I catch myself avoiding stuff all the time, and I'll tell you a story about it. Even doing that this weekend, and then finally catching myself in my own trap, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. But the thing with avoiding a story is, a lot of us avoid stories because we're smart, and it's like, I can't fall for that. Like, that's not me. These are all those defense mechanisms. And the thing is, playing defense is great when you're planning. When you're acting, you need to be on offense. It's like asking yourself, what's your core motivation? Are you motivated by playing to win or playing not to lose? Right? And those are not the same, right? And a lot of people are playing not to lose. And you see this like in the financial industry when they talk about like mutual funds and, investments and stuff. Everyone's like, playing not to lose. Like, they're afraid the big bad recession or big bad crash is going to come anytime. And the data shows opposite, but we as people avoid that story. So to get into investigating the stories, here's the thing that's funny. And there's a simple tool, and I learned this from actually a tour. I'm not sure who came up with it. I saw it first with Toyota. When I went and did a tour of one of their giant factories where my uncle used to work. And it's the 5 whys, right? And this is, people talk about this all the time, and this is like the simplest tool to use. So when you actually take a situation, like I'll give you an example, like mine. I was hiring a consultant to fix some things in my paperwork process. Like, I'm training someone to help me improve and speed up my like bookkeeping, strategic planning, all that kind of stuff. And I like doing that, but I had like this story that like I needed to do it all myself for a long time. And I was like, this is stupid. I don't need this. That's a story I don't need anymore. So like I asked myself, well, why did I have that story? So what's the story? Why do you believe that you have to do it all yourself? Well, I don't trust people to know what they're doing and keep track of it, and I'm the one who's going to be in trouble if anything goes wrong. Okay, well, why? And then you keep going down and down and down and down and down until you realize at the end of the day, it's usually, and this is what, at least for me, what it always comes back to like 80% of the time, is it's a fear of winning. A fear of winning, whatever it is. Like, like this goes for, I use this with my relationship with Christina. I use this with my health. I use this with, managing my day-to-day finances and to-do list, everything. If you go down and investigate with the 5 whys, it's amazing how fast you'll realize most of the time it's because you're afraid to win. Which is the greatest fear that everyone has. It's not like fear of loss. It's actually what happens if I have to admit to myself that I've been playing small, I mean, even I have this. I mean, like, I was just talking to someone before we recorded this about, Facebook ads. This is someone who's very successful. And I'm sitting there like asking him questions, and I'm like, he tells me the answers, and I'm like, really? It's that easy? And he's like, yeah, this is typically what works, pretty consistently. I mean, you have to adjust your numbers and test, obviously, like anything else. But it's like, this is the thing. And everyone has these complicated cockamamie strategies that they're trying to whiz bang it up. And yet at the same time, he's like, dude, this is a pretty basic model that's worked more or less for 4 or 5 years in one form or another, with a few adjustments here and there over the years as Facebook changes. But for the most part, this is the one that's a winning strategy. So it's like, wow, it was that easy. And I was like trying to come up with some cockamamie ads. So yeah, just that's where it is.
No, I love it.
It's never.
Like, this is no, I love this. Like, it's because this helps out a ton. Like, so first off, for those watching, if you are getting something out of this that is just, if you saw the last video, if you haven't seen the last video, go check out the last video we did. If you're getting something out of that is out of this video, I shouldn't even say if you're going to get something out of this video, and you're already getting something out of this video, because this is stuff that, it's funny. I mean, I spent tens of thousands of dollars on external, how to market, how to do strategy, how to do all this other stuff. And this is way more important. This is stuff that you invest in yourself, and it changes the game for everything. And so if you are liking what you're hearing right now, share this with somebody. Share this with somebody who is going to be impacted, who is already stuck. They're stuck. They might be stuck in business. They might be stuck in their purpose. They might be stuck, in addictions, like to alcohol or things like that. This will help them to get on the path to getting unstuck. And so I just wanted to take that quick break to just really ask you to tell you it's your obligation to share this with somebody, because it's really going to affect their lives in a positive way. So share this on, just hit the share button, or send the link to whomever it might be, because they're going to get a lot out of this. So no, I love this because so one thing that I found, and I want to hear your story. One thing that I found was that if I did investigate my story that I was telling myself, I would have judgments on that story. Like, so say, for example, like say that I was afraid to, say that I was afraid to do what I just did right there, asking people or telling people, hey, you need to share this with somebody. My past story would have been that, you're just trying to be greedy, you're trying to get likes, you're trying to become popular, you're trying to do whatever. But and when I would look into that story and try to investigate it, I would put judgments on it. Like immediately, well, even if that story is true, that's bad. I shouldn't do that. Like, so how do you actually not have judgments on your story, and why do you not want to have judgments on them?
Well, it's really simple. The first part about getting rid of judgments is stopping judging the judging, right? Like, what's wrong with judging, right? And a lot of people don't ask this question, right, before they even get into it. So they automatically are coming from the frame that judgments are wrong. Like, and the thing is, like, a lot of times what is the saying? I think my friend, when he was talking to me about NLP, said the map is not the territory, or something like that. And so everything is the map, right? Like, you have a map, so you have a belief that it's bad to have judgments. But in reality, those what you call judgments are actually your brain trying to quickly sort out like mountains of data quickly with rules of thumb and all that kind of stuff to make decisions faster, because it knows that the more decisions you make, the more you'll get ahead in life. Whoever makes the most decisions wins. Not winning or losing decisions, most total decisions. So first off, that's the key, like getting rid of the belief that there's something wrong with judging, because there isn't inherently, unless you decide there is, which now it's okay to get into this rabbit hole a little bit. But at the end of the day, that judgment that there's something wrong with judging, stop. Next, once you say that, ask yourself this, like, how does that protect you? Because that's actually what it's doing. Like, judgments are protecting you. Being like a judgmental, those people who are like, oh, her outfit's stupid, or who's this, or, blah, 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 whatever. Those type of people, are
Yeah.
actually so insecure that they're so afraid to have the spotlight shined on them that they put it on somebody else so it's not on them. So it's actually a defense
Yeah.
mechanism. And as soon as you realize that, it's like, oh, okay, I'm defending myself. What am I defending? Am I
Yeah.
afraid to
Yeah.
win? Am I afraid to put myself
Hmm.
out there? And the thing of it is, if everyone like think back like in high school, at the school dance is a great example, great metaphor for life. Everyone, the first couple songs, everyone stand on the wall. There's like nobody to
Yep.
dance for. You get that
Yep.
funky teacher out there that's like doing the funky chicken just to make everyone laugh, and then a couple people come out and it becomes a dance party, right? Every time.
Yep.
Everyone
Yep.
notices it and
Yep.
everyone still does it, right? Because everyone's afraid to have the light shine on them. But that's the thing in human nature, right? So we all in society, we take like an attention seeking person, oh, he's just looking for attention, right?
Mhm.
Because secretly we all want that.
Correct. Correct.
And
It's
and people
true.
don't realize this. So
No,
that's where the judgment comes in.
that's interesting. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, even right now, I'm like, oh yeah, judging is not necessarily bad, and the frame that I came with it is that it's bad, and so like,
Hmm.
because
And
I
for you it
didn't
might
know
be.
that particular, yeah, and it might be, and like that particular uh, um, example that you used was very apt to me because I would always look at those people. I'd be the guy at the dance looking at those people who are making fools out of themselves and saying like, "What idiots! Like, can't you
Yeah.
just like, why do you need to do that?" And but it's still at the same time, I'm like, that'd be actually pretty cool if I could just let loose and like not care, you know?
Yeah, and see,
Um,
that's secretly what you want to do. See, like you call
Totally.
them idiots to avoid like in your mind, like this is what the mind does. Anytime someone makes fun of someone else, really what they're secretly doing is trying to deflect the light. And deflecting,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, is something which is actually just your protection mechanisms. If you think about like going out to our hunter gatherer days and we're out there with sticks, I want to deflect a bear killing me and eating me up or whatever. Because at the end of the day, you're dealing with deep biology. We're talking like the most primitive parts of our brain, okay? Like the amygdala and all this other stuff. And when you don't train it to fire, it's that fight or flight response and it goes haywire, right? This is actually, I think, what causes a lot of the PTSD in the soldiers when they come back from war is that like that part of their brain is so
Yeah.
hyper trained in combat that when they come back to the modern world, they're still reacting. But that's how primitive the brain is. It's trying to save itself even though those threats are no longer there.
Yeah.
So the big thing with this is deflecting is a good thing. But again, it's always about playing not to lose, and that's what really it comes down to is, are you playing to win or are you playing not to lose? And you'll never get rid of this stuff. It's never getting rid of it. That's
Yeah.
why
Correct.
judging
Like,
it as bad is not
yeah.
effective.
That's the thing, and we'll definitely get into that, like that fact, because and that's actually not a bad thing that you'll never get rid of
Hmm.
it because you're
Right.
constantly expanding, you're
Hmm.
constantly becoming better, and so that's where it's not like a judgment on the idea that you'll never get rid of it is it's a judgment,
Yep.
whether it's a good judgment or a bad judgment. Like for me, I used to think of that as a bad thing. Oh, I'll never get rid of this. I'm always going to have these feelings. I'm always going to have these stories that come up. But then when you reframe it, you're like, oh, cool. Well, if I know that I always have these stories, and if I have the tools to be able to investigate these stories and actually use those stories to give me to basically give me the power to proactively become who I want to become, or who
Precisely.
God wants me to become, and like, and you see these as all teaching moments that constantly allow you to become better and better and better and better. Then, to me, it's like, oh, I just have to be aware that I'm telling myself a story. So maybe that's journaling every day. That maybe that's whatever it might end up being to actually investigate each little story. Like for example, I always like right now I've been anytime I have something that triggers me a little bit, I write it down so then I can go back and look at it.
That's good.
And see, and then start investigating and so on. So it's pretty crazy what like how just by how we think about something like that if we always have it, is it a bad thing or good thing? Well, knowing that you're making a judgment, and that judgment is, even the judgment itself is neither good nor bad. It can be a very, very powerful thing. And so, all that being said, so I wanted to hear your story. Now, was that the Facebook story?
Well, no, I got another one.
Okay,
Before
cool.
before we move on, I want to give people a reframe here. So
Okay.
here's the thing. We're talking about stories, and we talked about that. We use that word because of the first video, but I want to tell you, this is what I do, and this is where I turn these into, like, I can't always implement them immediately, but
Yeah.
here's a thing, and I prayed through this one a lot, so I know that this is like fire for me, is the stories you tell yourself are the fuel for you to get better.
Yes.
Okay? So without fuel, there is no fire. And a lot of times the stories keep you from doing stuff that's like crazy. So like 8 or 9 out of 10 stories you tell yourself actually protect you from something bad happening. And this is
Yeah.
what keeps us, I think, from being like hedonistic, and you hear like Hollywood celebrities where they have all this money and whatever, and they can go buck wild because like there's no one there to tell them no, that
Totally.
you can't do drugs all day or you'll die and you won't have a work anymore. You
Totally.
can't treat people like crap or else no one's going to want to work with you. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you're difficult to work with, you're not going to get ahead in life, or the money's going to disappear, right? So, everyone likes to have these archetypes as like the crazy wild celebrity. And the reality is if you've ever met them, a lot of those guys are so on point. They on it. Like
Yeah.
they are freaking on it, working like very diligent, very like always trying to get better. Like that's why 99% of them, but like the media doesn't like to talk about that. So the thing is, it's fuel. So use your stories as fuel, because it's like when that story comes up, when you investigate it, what you're actually doing is you're taking that firewood and putting it on like the bonfire of your spirit. Like, however you picture that for yourself, it doesn't even matter. But like, if you take that story and you say, look, how does this protect me? Don't need to be protected anymore. I'm going to transmute that into fire. So like, for example, I'll move into my story, and this is a great segue, so this morning, all weekend, I got an email, and I didn't realize I'd get it until like Saturday morning. It was Friday night. The consultant that I hired, they're out in California, so for them, it was like they were trying to get it done by the end of the day. It was already evening my time. I looked at the email Saturday morning, and I realized, oh, snap, I see why they did what they did. I only need this part fixed, and I was like, oh, okay, so how do I do this? And I avoided it, right? Like I felt that urge of like, oh, I don't know how to answer these questions. Oh, they're asking me all this list of questions. Oh, I'll just get to it Monday. I don't want to deal with this, don't want to deal with this, don't want to deal with this. So
Yeah.
Saturday all day, avoiding, just feeling like all this crap come up, just fear and like, oh, so much work to do, like all those stories. These are all the stories, right? The story of, oh, it's so much work to do. I see this list of questions and I'm like, oh my God, like there's so much work to do. They're gonna ask me all these things. I don't know the answer. It's why I hired you in the first place, because I don't know the answer, blah, blah, blah. So all these stories coming up, right? So yesterday I got everything done. Like I didn't take my Sabbath day, shame on me, but I was like, I need to get a bunch of things cranked out and done. And so I just finished a bunch of stuff, and I had pushed this off to this morning to deal with it this morning. I was like, you know what? Last night, about 7, 8 o'clock, I was like, I'm actually going to look at this and objectively say, what questions are they asking me, and why are they asking me these, and what can I do about it tonight? Like, what's the first step? See, I eat my own cooking. I avoided it. I had no first step, and therefore the resistance took over, and I put it off Saturday and most of Sunday, and I would have put it off till today, but I was just like, let me see and experiment with this. So I look at the questions only to find out I was thinking they were working on one part of fixing the issue, and they were giving me a quote for the entire issue. Okay, so first off, 3/4 of their questions were relevant, but not relevant right now. So they were important, but not urgent. And there was a couple of them that were more urgent because they were in the immediate future, right? And so I was like, okay, I was like, why did they do it this way? And I looked at it, and I looked at the folder of information that I gave them, and I gave them information on the whole part. So they were under the assumption that I wanted a quote for the entire fixing of the issue, not just the immediate part that I had in my brain. So I'm like, oh, I see why they did it this way. Okay, now like 3/4 of the work is no longer of my concern right now, because once I get the first part done, the rest of it will kind of fall in place based on what the issue is. And I said, look, like, I get why you did this. This is my mistake. If we can't hit the deadline, that's fine, because I'll be the one to eat it because it's my fault. I didn't give you guys clear instructions. And I gave him my intention. So this morning I get an email from the guy who's running the project, and he's like, totally get where you're coming from. We'll only focus on that first part for now. We'll get to the other stuff later, and we'll do the quote in multiple parts instead of like all one big giant quote. So by sitting down and tackling this, I answered their questions, which actually weren't that bad. They were, when I actually read them and thought them, I was like, okay, this is a simple answer to move the ball down the field. I wasn't going for a Hail Mary, get it all done, which is what a lot of people do. I'm going for like let me get 4 yards, let me run the ball 4 yards. And so I answered all their questions, and in like 15 minutes I had answered it, and then I sent the guy another email kind of explaining like my intention and where I was coming from and whatever. So I literally fixed the problem. I got the email this morning today where he's like, yep, totally makes sense. Gotcha. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with the other 3 parts later, because once the first part gets done, the other 3 parts are really easy to fix, and that's what I said. I was like, look, I need you to help me get this one done right first. So I'm kind of like a great example when we try to write a whole email campaign for something. And instead of working on just the first email, we're concurrently working on the entire email by email. Instead of going email 1, finish it, email 2, finish it, email 3, finish it. We basically realized, but because I avoided it, I could have had that crap done and had all that fear in my brain gone like Saturday morning when I first saw it. I was like, oh, I don't want to deal with this, right? Because I thought they were going to ask me all these questions. And when I actually looked with a clear mind, I was like, oh my God, this isn't that bad at all. This is so simple. So that's the whole thing with avoiding is when you avoid something, your brain automatically, and this is biology, makes it this big, like a mountain out of a molehill, as my grandpa used to say. And the thing is, when you do that, that is to protect you. All those feelings, like all the like hormones or whatever it is, I don't even know what they all are like, hold the phone, bud. Calm down. Don't do this. You will die if you tackle this. You realize this, like, I'm going out on a dance floor. I'm doing a video. I'm publicly speaking. Are you going to die if you get in front and talk to people? Hell no, you're not going to die. But your brain is trying to protect you. So if you realize that that's what it is, and anytime you feel those fear, and it's like a tsunami, like it comes like in a wave. This is what I tell everybody. Fear operates like a giant tsunami wave. Right? Yeah. But the thing of it is it's not real. And as soon as you feel that, so I've actually been developing for a long time, and there's a lot of ways to do this, I'll share mine, is the concept of whenever you notice that well of fear, you won't get it all the time. Mm-hmm. But if you can recognize, okay, when I feel X, aka the fear wall, what's the first step? Like triggering an automatic brain, that your brain, and this is where it takes a lot of conditioning, and like I've literally spent years developing this, and I'm still not 100% there, is when you can say, oh, I feel this wave of fear, what's the first step? Wave of fear, what's the first step? Like automatic. And you could do one of them little rubber bands. That's why I started this. You put a little rubber band on your wrist, and anytime you feel a fear well come up, however bigger, snap it, just to be like cognizant, because that's the thing. You're trying to like reverse engineer biological wiring, and it's impossible unless you're aware of it, and that's where you have to kind of transcend your own biology, and it's kind of weird for people to talk about and think like this, but that's really what it is. So when you investigate the story, it's true. You doing it, No,
I love this. It's like I mean, it's great because it's just recognizing. So I had an incident where, because this came up when this story came up when you mentioned that 8 out of 10 of these stories that you have actually protect you, but even those ones, like investigating them, lead to greater awareness about like why that happened. So I had this story. So I want to say, so my wife and our family are on this like really healthy eating kick.
Cool.
A lot of especially like gluten-free stuff.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, our kids, like their allergies were going out of control, just like crazy. And ever since we like moved to the kind of gluten-free and just organic and everything like that, like no eczema, no allergies, everything, we saw awesome benefits with it. And my wife and I, the day prior to this story, this incident I'm going to share, we're talking about just like, wow, look at all the benefits this way of eating has happened. Like we just see just so many benefits that have come with it with our family. And and so that was a really awesome conversation. The next day, actually it was the next night, my wife, I forgot why she was coming. She was coming with my two older daughters, and they had gone to the bakery and they got some cupcakes, like gluten-free cupcakes, which I didn't care necessarily about those. But then she had gotten like Doritos and like these like pretzels with like, nasty stuff on them, like vanilla, but with a whole like it was like titanium oxide for coloring and all this other stuff like on the ingredients. And I'm like, okay.
So you're a chemistry food, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've been personally, I've been doing like a lot of like self-development type stuff. And one of the things that for me, one of the things I want to develop my leadership, especially as a father and husband. And so one of the story immediately that I told myself like right then and there was, okay, if you want to be a good leader, and a good husband, you need to take control of this situation right now.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what I ended up doing was just saying, okay, cool, give me the Doritos, give me this. And I opened them up and I threw them into the garbage. And of course, my wife was just like, wow, you are such an amazing leader, Dean. I'm so glad that you helped me to see the light that, how dare you? Yeah, because in my story was that if I just if I just take charge, if I I'm the man, I should just make the decisions, do this for my family. She's going to respect me and everything like that. And that was the story I was telling myself. That's good leadership. Well, she didn't like it. My kids didn't like it. Nobody liked it, and I didn't like it either. I actually ended up investigating the story and basically saying, does a good leader just, take something like that, belittle them, and then throw the stuff in the garbage? No, a good leader will not berate. A good leader is understanding, will assert and ask questions. A good leader will make it so that the whoever he's leading feels like they're becoming better. And so I had to go and actually investigate that. And then I actually ended up communicating that to my wife. She was super appreciative after the fact and basically was like, yeah, you looked like you were basically tyrannical beforehand, made me feel like crap. But now that you're telling me like how you were feeling and why you were doing it, and it actually opened the door to a lot of good communication and everything like that with my wife. And then now, like, it actually helped me with my leadership to not be like, because imagine if I was like, Brad, you should have said this in the Facebook Live, and as we're doing Facebook Live, I'm like, you're an idiot, and that's not leadership, So, but because of a story that I was telling myself, I confused, tyranny with leadership, So.
Well, a lot of people in this way, and this is with a lot of men, because this is the snap reaction. Again, this is just like by you telling yourself that story and reacting that way, it's proving the story to yourself, right?
Correct.
Because if you prove that control doesn't work, it means you're crazy and you're judgmental and you're a loser. Again, protecting you, keeping you in the collective. But one thing that and this is where words are important, is there's a big difference between control and command, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of command works, control never does, right? Because no one likes to be controlled. Like, think of, like, and even with command, like just look at, great example of this difference is like when you're like, hey Brad, I need you to get me X, Y, and Z by such and such a time. Like, I always get it for you because it's like easy. It's like, oh, okay, like that's what he needs. He's got a plan, and like it's not really a command in the like a bossing sense. It's just like, this is what I need. It's very clear. Boom, go do it. And the thing about being a leader is like, to be a leader, you have to be a good follower first. Keyword being follower first, right? And so that's where like you set the tone, and because tyranny comes from weakness. Right. And like that story is a very big one that a lot of men tell themselves, like at least in my experience, is that like there's this weird, like, people are afraid to command themselves, even themselves. Like, they're like, I want to control my behavior. I want to control this. I'm going to control my diet. I'm going to control. No one likes control, even yourself. So you'll actually rebel against yourself. And especially depending on what personality type you are, if you're naturally a rebellious person, you'll rebel against your own self. And that's when people's lives go buck wild, and, they, have affairs, and like they get 300 pounds or something like ridiculous, because they're actually rebelling against their own desire to control themselves, as opposed to saying like, how do I direct this attention to something that's more effective? This is why even the concepts of right and wrong get dangerous and slippery slope a lot of times, because right and wrong by nature of the words are subjective. So there's very few things that are truly inherently right or wrong. It's not 100% relativistic, but like 95% of the world is subjective, and there's like 5% that I think, is the truth, and you and me know what we're talking about there. But that's something that's important for people to realize, is that when you're investigating these stories, your reaction oftentimes is to defend the status quo, because the status quo is safe. This is why you see in society people who are in abusive situations. One of the things that a lot of times that the psychologists have to program people, and I met someone who does this with kids, and it was really interesting, but he's like, a lot of kids will stay in abusive situations, and they, as adults, even though that abuser is no longer in the picture, they have to almost be like reconditioned to normal ways that people talk to each other. So for example, if you're constantly belittled and told that you're a loser, you're fat, or you're ugly, or you're never going to do anything good with your life, you hear this as a kid, you will do and carry that stuff with you, even though that person's no longer telling you that, because that story is so deep in your brain that it's like, I need to defend that because that's what I know. So I'm going to create situations where I put myself in a losing situation. So for example, and this is I'll give you another example for me, is for the last 5.5 years, and since we've been working together for most of the last 3, and even before that, I've done so much to build other people's businesses, and yet like there was this belief that like, oh, no one's ever going to want to buy Brad's product. I'm like, what is that protecting? And I like 6 months ago, I really started digging into this one, because I was like, wow, this keeps coming up, and the world keeps presenting the same story until you deal with something to get to teach the lesson or whatever. And I think that's how God works too. But here's the thing: once I started investigating that, like, what if like the tactics actually work, and that's the product that I'm supposed to create. Now, all of a sudden, maybe people do want what I have to offer, and instead of selling everyone else's thing. Because I kept looking, and our friend, that we both know, Gonzalo, was just telling me this the other day, and he's like, dude, just imagine if all the deals that didn't work out, because the people either dropped the ball or they got distracted or whatever that you worked on. Imagine if all that work been on your business. And then just like, oh God, like, oh, it's like painful.
Totally.
And like, and he said this to me before a couple times, and I avoided it. So it kept getting worse until I sit there and put myself in a position where I'm like, I have to face this and deal with this, because I'm robbing the world of the things that I can teach by not teaching them. This story is screwing over the world. And like, I have an exercise that I go through, and I'll share this in another video, but basically it forces you to really be accountable for this. Like, if this story keeps playing out, where is my life going to be in 5 years?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and
Exactly.
I'm like, I can't even imagine. Like, I mean, but
Yeah.
same with you with your story. Like, if you were tyrannical in control, you know, 5 years from now, your oldest is going to be a teenager. A couple of them will be teenagers, and are they going to want to hang out with you if you're like always trying to like
No,
boss them around
exactly.
or control them? You know, they're
Exactly.
going to rebel, and they're going to like
Yep.
go off and do what they want just to kind of, I don't know,
Get you
like
off your
just to say,
their back and
yeah,
like
screw you, Dad. Like, I'm going to show you, you know, and like whatever, you know, like that kind of energy, right?
yep.
So it's great. It's a great awareness, and that's something to take this on action. Is like looking at this and saying like investigating the story is never as scary as it is. And if you break it down like we talked about in the first one and look at the facts of the situation, look at the facts of your story, because some of it's true. There's a thread of truth. It's like a myth. Part of it's true, and then part of it's like embellished. So if you can go back to that and separate the story, and when you're investigating it, what's real? Like in your case, this is what I would do, like in my head, so someone has a great example. You know, you guys switched the food patterns to the healthier gluten stuff, no gluten stuff. Okay, they come back with Doritos and titanium oxide chemistry food. Okay, so you can look at the fact and say that, yes, the fact of the situation is they bought a bunch of crappy, nasty food that's going to piss off their allergies again, right? Like,
Yep.
probably, because it's chemistry food.
Yep.
And so that is a fact. Now, where it's also a fact that you handled that in a way where everyone, it's just like meets with resistance, because human nature is human nature. So that is true, a fact. What is a more effective way to do it, which is what you came to the conclusion. And this is all of a sudden, like, the two facts were, one, the food was crap, so you were correct in being upset about that. Two, you also handled it and got the reaction that you knew you would get if you were objectively looking at it. If you treat people that way, they're always going to react that way. They're always going to be like mad at you or pissed off or whatever. And then shifting to a more effective strategy, which is, hey, look, okay, you know, what's up? There you go. Boom. You know, like, this is a better strategy. Does that make sense? And then that's the other thing. You know, you ask people, does that make sense? And then all of a sudden, boom, they're like, oh yeah. And then they think it's their idea. And then boom, you know, you're back in the game, you know? So that's just a story.
I
like,
love this.
You know?
So yeah, so like this is great stuff, man. You know, this is like we said before, this is part 2 of a 3-part series. We're gonna have another video tomorrow that will take you further on how to get unstuck. This is stuff that these are the things that when you understand these tools, you understand how this stuff works. It'll literally change your life, whether it's you want to have a better marriage, whether you want to have a better relationship with your kids, whether you want to make more money, whether you want to leave a full-time job, whether you want to get a full-time job, whatever it might be. The more that you invest time and money into yourself, the more that you're going to realize that is the absolute best investment that you can make. I mean, when Brad taught me all this stuff, my income flew through the roof, partially because I was telling myself a story that nobody would want a product that I had. I ended up making a product because of Brad, and going out, and on top of that, I was still thinking there's no way that somebody's going to want to pay for this particular product and see me in front of a camera or anything like that. And it wasn't until I changed that story, and the first time we actually launched the product, I ended up, the revenue wise, me and Brad partnered. We ended up doing, I think it was like $65,000 in revenue within like a weekend, which totally told me that the old story was not necessarily factual, right?
Right.
And so, if you are getting something out of this, like I said before, you are getting something out of this. You are getting something out of this. When you put this stuff into action, you're going to see some massive results. So, if you know anybody else who would benefit from this, please share this video. Let them know. It could be the difference between a marriage saved, a life saved. It could be the difference between someone going broke or becoming rich. And so share this with someone that you care about. On top of that, we're doing a deep dive training. So the more that you share this, the better it's going to be for other people. But also on top of that, they're going to be able to have access to that deep dive training that we'll put into the comments of these videos this week as well. And then also, if you're watching this on on a different page, we'll have a button or something like that that will take you to that deep dive training as well. So, Brad, go ahead and close us out, man.
Yeah, well, and it's just there's a lot of stories, and I mean, you brought up that first product, and it's great because if you remember back in those days, one of the other stories that you had was that you couldn't pitch on a webinar. Do you remember that one? That was a big story tied to that. Totally. Yeah, like you were scared to death of that, and that's the thing. Like the biggest thing that I'll say about all this stuff is that you're always going to have stories. And it's like peeling an onion. As soon as you peel a layer, there's another layer and another layer. It's like a never-ending onion. So I do this every day, folks. And if you're watching this, and it's like you can change someone's world by helping them see that they're way more capable of. And that's the whole intention of this is you will never know how truly capable and powerful you are as a human being until you investigate your stories, and you'll realize that you've been selling yourself short, and it's okay because we all do it. We're not told in a lot of schooling and stuff like that to get ahead. Like we artificially do that with money and status symbols, but the reality is all that stuff is minuscule compared to what you're really capable of. So just investigate these stories, separate the facts from the stories, and then dive into them. They're never as bad as you think. Right? Like you're not going to die. And if you feel like you're going to die, that's when you're in a story, right? Because that's what the body does. Like it creates that feeling of being in the story. So, thanks for watching. And if you need anything, just put a comment in and we'll help you get sorted. So
awesome. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video. Have a great one,
right,
and start investigating those stories.